There is only God. Well, how can there be such God enjoyment without loss of face, without sacrifice of self, without being undone in God? And how do you begin to realize such enjoyment? You begin to realize such enjoyment by suffering. Like you did after the holidays. That's a kind of instance of suffering. But no one begins to do sadhana until he or she has suffered, begun to observe and know that fundamentally, whether the circumstances are pretty good or not so good, that fundamentally life is suffering. Their destiny is suffering. It is a complication, a depression. There is a fundamental sense to life itself over time that is suffering. You get to know this only by suffering. By living an ordinary, manifest life and doing what you feel like doing, doing what everybody does, doing what is culturally impressed upon you, doing what circumstances require you to do by reaction. Trying to make this a sort of a heaven world, a utopia. Try to make human life some sort of perfect vessel, whatever. Try to make your own life sort of work out terrific. By living a life, you will know suffering. And so suffering is the first form of grace. And it's only when you begin to comprehend your life as suffering, as limitation, as dis-ease, in some very fundamental way, that you will do sadhana in its true form. Anybody can want to be consoled. Anybody can feel that life could be better, or that life is not really so terribly good for me right now, and so forth. But sadhana rests upon the critical comprehension of life itself as being bound. When this begins, when this recognition appears, not necessarily all kinds of dismal, neurotic side effects, because it can appear in the midst of a life that is relatively getting along relatively well. In fact, unless there is a kind of ordinariness to a life, not likely to beat very much intelligence. People whose karmas are profound, for whom nothing goes right and so forth, are generally those who are the least available to the grace of suffering. So most commonly, this critical insight or sense of life as suffering occurs in the midst of a life that's getting along relatively well. It can occur in anyone, certainly. It can be getting along, it can come in the midst of a life that's getting along fantastically well from the conventional point of view, and it can also come in the midst of a life that is really from the conventional point of view, not getting along well at all. And similarly, suffering, or the making of this insight more profound, is a principle, a form of the content of sadhana itself. But when it begins, first of all, your perception of the world begins to change without necessarily having that perception be coincident with a philosophical comprehension, sort of mental view. But prior to this acknowledgement of dis-ease, you think of the world as a something. You objectify it as a place, as a circumstance, as a material event, and yourself also. You imagine that the world is a massive, solid, physical process, and that even your thinking and so forth is somehow produced by chemicals. And you go on living that sort of solid, muscular life until you begin to suffer. And you can't be blithe and naive any longer. And with this sort of a breaking up that suffering produces comes a tacit awareness that the world is not physical in nature, but psychophysical. And all of the spiritual and religious traditions are essentially based upon the acknowledgement that the world is a psychophysical process, not a physical one. The world itself, not you only, not man only, but the world, this stuff, this universe, is a psychophysical process whose essential foundation is conscious then. And all of the imagery of God and or whatever other kinds of language developed within a tradition appear based on this original supposition. You become more and more sensitive to this, the more released you are into a fuller sense of your own existence. When you cease simply mechanically to move about and do what you do and get it on in purely vital terms, but are opened up through failure, through suffering, through insight. Then the world begins to seem very different to you. The more psychic you become, the more conscious you become, the more obvious it becomes that the world is also of that nature. And you begin to move into a psychic relationship to the world, not just a physical one. So in this case, the psychic conscious dimension in yourself has ceased to be stopped and prevented by the conventions of life. Suffering has released you into your own depth. The profundity of this awareness varies from person to person. But the possibility of sadhana exists truly only in that instant, when the world ceases to be so solid and when you are no longer obsessed. You may be still moving with your life, but no longer obsessed with it as something ideal and perfect. The whole form of existence has become loose. Its definitions are not so clear. And all kinds of experiences may begin to occur in a person, in this case, all of which tend to make him more in awe, feel more mystery, even drive him a little batty. In which the world becomes like dreams, and in fact it is. We're so used to our conventional objectification of things that we forget that we don't live within a defined world. Everybody has seen photographs of the Earth and they think that that's it. Then, it's, well, it's a something then. But the world is a realm, such as the one into which you enter in dreams. Where is that place in dreams? What is its size? The world is exactly of that kind, but it's you are timed with it, associated with it in such a way that it seems much more formidable. You see the subtle and dream worlds briefly and confusedly because you basically rest in this one. But when you begin to suffer life, you see that it corresponds exactly to your requirements. Things happen to you, so-called good and so-called bad, exactly in time with your tendencies. Things are always testing you, not fulfilling you, because there is an equal force to the positive and negative. But when you begin to see the world as a realm rather than as a place, a fixed something to which you are attached, it becomes much more amusing then.